Welcome to the SCG Health Gimme 15 Minutes education program for medical professionals. My name is Jennifer Searfoss, and I am the CEO of the Searfoss Consulting Group. Since my last name is so difficult to spell, we call it SCG Health, so it's a little easier. We opened our doors in 2011, and we focus our client services on value improvement, revenue cycle management, and strategic planning in this post-health reform world. This presentation will address what you need to know about keeping medical documentation and the general rules for documentation. This session, along with many others, are available for free as a video archive on YouTube. SCG Health also offers in-person conferences on many topics, including coding and documentation, compliance, and EMR implementation. Learn more at scghealth.com. One quick legal note. None of the information contained in this presentation should be construed as legal advice. While I am an attorney, this is just my opinion. So I encourage you to contact counsel if you have any questions regarding state or federal laws that apply to the concepts covered in this session. So with that, let me get started because I totally geek out about this. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I'm just such a big fan. So let's talk about the medical documentation requirements that are out there. And if you're interested, we actually do have an infographic. I'll show you that at the end of the session. And I do have a little bit.ly over here, this little short URL that is able to help you and enable you to quickly get over to this infographic that I'm going to walk you through. So it's over here, this infographic. So let me start you off with where I start, which is the big bad wolf known as the Internal Revenue Service. The IRS is a great place to start because if you think about medical practice, it really is a business. So start with that requirement and then move from there. So things to think about is that for IRS, you're going to default to 7 years. Just generally everything that you want and need is going to be 7 years. From my perspective, you're going to include all of your gross receipts. So just remember, $1,500 is a receipt. It's an invoice, actually. Any of your assets, purchases, expenses, your tax filings, deposit slips, canceled checks, your bank statements, all of those are items that you're going to want to retain for 7 years. And then since you're an employer too, you're going to have all your employer items that you're also going to need to keep. So that's your employer taxes, wages, benefits, employer roster, training materials, W-2s, and return tax returns. So, think about it more broadly. What is the financial aspect of your business? So that definitely includes your 1500s. Whether or not that includes the EOBs that come back, that's a question for your office. I'm always going to say that that is a financial document, and we need to retain those for 7 years. So if you're interested in more information, go check out the IRS website because I know you all are super excited to go to the IRS website. But the second thing to keep in mind when we look at retention is that HIPAA, the federal law, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, does have a default, which is 6 years. 6 years. So when we look at health information, protected health information, which is going to be the medical chart, it's going to be the lab items that are related to that, it's going to be pathology reports, it's going to be anything that's related to your medical record, that's going to be 6 years. Now, another part of HIPAA does say that you need to keep secure and private data that is part of this PHI, electronic data, and then your paper and everything else that falls under HIPAA. You need to do that for 50 years. But that goes back to whether or not you're keeping it and you have that available. So remember, though, your retention requirement is 6 years. After that, you can go into do your destruction. So if you're looking for more information on that, that is MedLearn Matters, so MLN Matters, SE1022. That's for more information on that one. Now, archival, once you've figured out your documents that you want to keep, let's talk about how you're going to archive them. And the last thing I'll talk about is going to be the sort of the destruction discussion. So archival, you're going to look for original documents, unless, because most offices now are looking at how can you get rid of paper, can you do an authenticated scan? Now, what an authenticated scan is that it's going to be a color, I'm a big fan of color, big fan of color, a color scan of those original documents in the type of file, so in the file name, and then what's the metadata, that file properties, you're going to have who scanned it, when they scanned it, they're going to name it in such a way that you have a naming convention that it can be easily identifiable. That's going to be how you're going to do authenticated scans. So I'm a big fan of doing those two items that are related, meaning original documents can become an authenticated scan, and then you can archive them. And obviously, if they become electronic, it's a lot easier to keep them. The other thing too is remember software reports are really a big part of your documentation retention policy. So that includes all of your major systems. So your EMR, your practice management system, probably QuickBooks, whatever you're using to capture your data. Maybe you're using Razor's Edge or something else. So think about what software reports you need to have, who was using it, how they were using it. End of year reports might be your P&L, those type of things. Remember that there are software reports and audits that you need to be performing and documenting. Those need to be part of your documentation plan. So one of the questions I get all the time is what happens when you move to a new system? Really important conversation to have internally. EMRs always get updated, and oftentimes the software itself is going to be updated to a point where it's not able to access prior information. Or think about it, when we used to have backups, remember the days when we had tapes? I know, imagine today we have tapes, what? So keep in mind that the technology just changed, and you need to think about how you can either update those items or, and most appropriately, modify it so that it's either re-recorded in a new format so that it still meets your documentation and retention requirements, but isn't in a format that is going to be accessible. Some of the formats that I look at that are going to be more long-term, PDF seems to be something that's universal, along with Excel. For those of us who did word processing back in Corvel, think about where that is today. So again, think about trying to go to a documentation, especially on the electronic side, some way that you can have access. And then a lot of the tapes, we've actually re-recorded those over either to CD or put them to, just a drive itself. So if you're looking for more information on this, this is for AHIMA and retention and destruction of health information. So before I talk about destruction, because I'm actually going to take you over to the OCR website for that, I want to talk a little bit about state law. So if you are not familiar with state law, please go and check it out. There's a really great document on healthit.gov. It may be a starting place because I can't speak, since it's not my document, I can't speak to how old it is. But it does have some great retention period information for health information. And remember, each state is different. So here I'm located in Virginia. Virginia is different than Maryland. And it does spike out data that's different for hospitals versus outpatient departments versus labs versus imaging. So make sure that you think about that. And again, think about what you want to do. So for example, in Maryland, clinical records are kept for 5 years after the date of creation, which is great. But if HIPAA is saying 6 years, okay, so which one do you need to worry about, and how are you going to retain them? And then remember, you've got 7 years for IRS. So is it easier for you to have one guideline for just the policies, or is it more appropriate for you to have different dates? I've found for most of our clients that we do have different dates for different types of documents. And it could be some of these, like, sign-in logs and audit registries. We don't keep those for very long. We might keep those for 1, 2, 3 years. It just really depends on the information. And I do highly recommend that you go out and you check out more information that's out there because it's a really, really important area. But I'm going to start talking about document retention. Actually, let me first go over here. So we have a whole page on document retention. It includes our infographic and a little bit about it. It was originally done back in 2015, but it's still really, really relevant, and we're going to be updating that. But one of the top things that we get asked about is HIPAA in the trash. I do not know why, but we get asked about it all the time. So I'm going to go over and we're going to talk about disposal, because this is a really, really big part of all of this and very much related. So there's a great blog that Marla, who's one of our contributing writers, did. She's a fellow attorney and really went into some of the information from OCR. OCR is the Health and Human Services Office of Civil Rights, and they publish guidance that's out there on what you can do. And so I'm going to just link over there. It's from the blog. I highly recommend you go and check out the blog. But this guidance is how you're going to render protected health information unusable, unreadable, or indecipherable. really important. So let's talk about the different ways you might have it. For paper, you need to make sure that it cannot be put back together. So imagine what would happen if you gave old-fashioned shredders, the ones that had just the lines, if you had a whole bunch of 5-year-olds that had a lot of tape and glue and all the time in the world, they might be able to put it back together. That is not going to be sufficient. So big fan of the diamond or cross hash cutting, and then it needs to, have something else done to it. It could be burned, it could be pulped, it could be something else. That something else needs to happen. If you're using third-party vendors, please be aware of recent litigation that really gets into your responsibility to work with your third-party vendors and make sure this information is destroyed in the proper way. If you have an electronic media, remember that having it cleared, purged, or destroyed, it could be major magnets, it could be overwriting something with it. I'm a big fan of taking a big operating system like Windows 10 and overwriting a drive a ton of times until it's completely indecipherable. So there's a number of ways that you can do this, but know that, again, the OCR guidance is out there, and I highly recommend working with your IT vendors and your third-party vendors for the destruction and distribution of PHI to a point where it's going to go either to a trash bin in the sky or just honestly it's going to be burned, where it's unusable, unreadable, or indecipherable after your documentation retention policies have expired. So again, we've talked IRS, 7 years, HIPAA, 6 years. Then there might be some other state law that could be a part of it. So figure out what you want to do, think about how you're going to archive, make sure that you're looking at original documents or authenticated scans, and then you're going to think about how you're going to destroy it. So with that, I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation. For those of you who are watching the video archive, please remember to rate this video. To receive notices about upcoming Gimme 15-minute programs and other educational sessions, please sign up at scghealth.com. Thank you for joining this 15-minute presentation. It is my pleasure to be a part of your education plan, and this concludes the presentation.